Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to knit this basic crop top. First of all, this pattern is made to measure, so you don't have to make it cropped. You can make this bit longer so it's normal length. And also, since it's made to measure, you can also adjust this width. The pattern is really easy. The top is made of a front panel and a back panel, and these two panels are basically the same except for this part. And we're going to make each panel from the bottom up. We're going to cast on a number of stitches, which is this length, and then work the ribbing, work our way up, decrease here, and then for the back panel we're just going to go straight up. For the front panel we're going to split it from here and then work one shoulder and the other. So this is the yarn I'm going to be using. It's got 200 grams per skein, so one skein is enough for the top. The yarn is 85% cotton and 15% polyester, and it calls for 6mm needles, but I'm gonna size up to 10mm so that we have a little bit of that mesh look. So I'm gonna be using circular needles, but I'm gonna use them as straight needles. So if you don't have circular ones, you have straight needles, you can make this top as well. The reason why I use this is just because I'm used to them. So how am I going to use them as straight needles? I pretty much just ignore the fact that they are connected. So I'll see this cord as a part of this needle. So it looks like a straight needle like this. And that's another straight needle. And I'll pretty much ignore the cord from about here to here. So this part doesn't exist. So we need to make two panels, one front, one back for the top, and we're gonna start each panel from the bottom up. So we'll begin from the ribbing at the bottom, as you can see. Step 1, we need to cast on, and the cast on method I use is long tail cast on. So basically I'm going to leave a really long tail here, make a slip knot somewhere there. And for the tail, I'll leave about 2 meters. So I have a long tail here, and I'm gonna make a slip knot about here. To make a slip knot, create a circle and then pull this yarn through, and there's the loop. Now I'm going to place this loop like that, with the long tail closer to me. Not like that, like this. And then I'm going to insert my needle. So that's the first stitch. To cast on the second stitch, I'm going to grab my yarn, open it up like that. And then make a slingshot. You can see we have two loops here. One is created by the thumb, the other one by the index finger. I'm going to go through the thumb loop like that, from the bottom up. And then I'll go through the index finger loop, top down. And then the thumb loop, top down. And let go and pull yarn tight. So that's one stitch, that's the second stitch. Let's do that again. So grab the yarn like that and slingshot. Thumb loop bottom up. Index finger loop top down. And thumb loop top down. Pull tight. You don't have to pull this too tight, just a bit snug. So again, grab yarn, open, slingshot, thumb bottom up, index top down, and then thumb top down. Slingshot, thumb bottom up, index top down, and thumb top down. So you're going to continue doing this, and when you do it fast, it looks like this. So you're going to continue doing this until your stitches this length reach about half of your bust measurement. So I'll cast on my stitches and come back and show you what I mean. So as you can see, I have my stitches here. Since I have a little bit cord, I'm gonna push it to that side so the stitches don't come off. So I have my stitches here. I'm just gonna put it like that. I can spread the stitches out and see if it can reach across my chest like that. And it looks like I can get rid of some stitches actually. So because we're making a ribbing, we need the stitch number to be an even number. Now I have 45, so I'm gonna get rid of one more. So now I have 44 stitches, which is an even number, and it can also go across my chest like that. If you're using a straight needle, this might be a bit hard to measure, but you can still do it. If you replace the needles and the cord with a piece of scrap yarn, then you'll be able to measure it like I did. So you can use a yarn needle and just thread it through the loops, and then you just take these stitches off the needle. But then after that, you'll need to replace the scrap yarn with the needles back, so you can continue working. Okay, when we're casting on, it looks like that. Now we're going to turn our work. So if you're using straight needles, you'll have all the stitches on the left needle and the right needle would be empty. Now I have my yarn here. This is the one that's connected to the ball, and this is the long tail. We're going to be working with this yarn, so don't mix them up. I'm going to insert in the very first stitch like that. Grab this yarn that's connected to the ball, go like this, around the needle, and then I'm going to pull this yarn through this loop, like that. Then I'm going to take this off the needle, like that. So that is a knit stitch. Now, to make the ribbing, we're going to alternate between a knit stitch and a purl stitch. To make a purl stitch, this yarn needs to be between the two needles, or you can see it as in front. So, make sure the loop doesn't come off. I'm going to bring yarn around like that to the front, and then insert my needle in the next stitch that way. Bring yarn around like that, and then pull this new yarn through this loop on the left needle. So like that. And then take this stitch off. So that's a purl stitch. The next stitch is a knit stitch again. For a knit stitch, the yarn needs to be behind. So bring it over like that. The third stitch we knit it, and when we knit, we insert like that. Create a new loop, and then pull the new loop through the old one on the left needle, and then take that old stitch off. Now we do the purl stitch again. Bring the yarn around like that, insert in the next stitch, bring yarn around again, create a new loop, pull it through this loop on the left needle, and then take it off. So basically this is what we're going to repeat. Knit, purl, and then the next stitch is knit again. So bring yarn to the back. For knit, we insert like that, create new loop, pull it through the old one, and then take the old one off. Next stitch, purl, bring yarn to the front, insert like that for a purl stitch, create a new loop, and pull it through the old loop, and take the old loop off. Okay. Next stitch, knit. I'm gonna speed it up a little bit. If you can't catch up, just rewind to the beginning where I was going slow. So it's good if you can recognize which stitch is knit, which stitch is purl, so you don't have to keep counting the stitches. If we have a horizontal bump here, that's a purl stitch. If we don't have it, that's a knit stitch. So as you can see, we just did a purl stitch. That means the next stitch is knit. Make sure my yarn is at the back. Insert, new loop, and pull it through the old loop. Take it off. Next stitch, purl, bring yarn to the front. Purl, insert like that. Create a new loop, pull it through the old one, and then take the old loop off. So you just continue doing that. I'll see you at the end of this row. So I'm near the end, that's a knit, and that's a purl. I should end with the purl because we started with the knit. So that was row 1. Row 2, I'm going to turn my work and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to begin with a knit stitch. So insert my hook like that. By the way, make sure your yarn look like this. So insert, grab. The first stitch, you pull it a bit tighter. And then yarn over, knit. So row 2, we do the same thing. Knit, purl, knit, purl. That was a knit. The next one is purl. So bring yarn to the front. Insert like that. And then purl the next stitch. Bring yarn to the back. Knit the next stitch. And you just continue alternating between a knit and a purl stitch, just like row 1. And just like row 1, when you finish the last stitch, you're just going to turn your work. So this is for the ribbing. If you want your ribbing to be thicker, you just do more rows. But you need to remember how many rows you've done because you need to repeat the same thing for the other panel. So if you do 4 rows for this panel, you need to do 4 rows for the other as well. If 5 rows here, then 5 rows there as well. So I think I'll repeat this row 2 more times. I'm gonna do that and then meet you back here and show you what to do next. So I've done that row 4 times in total. Now we're going to begin the main pattern. The main pattern is super easy once you get past the ribbing. So the main pattern is just keep doing the knit stitch. So you insert your hook and then knit, next stitch, knit as well. Because we're doing knit stitches, we don't need to keep moving the yarn like that. We just continue doing knit stitch. So I'll see you at the end of this row. So end of row 1. Turn your work. So this is row 2. We're just gonna do knit stitches. So insert like that and then knit. So I'm just gonna do this every row. Again, remember how many rows you've done because you're gonna do the same thing for the other panel. So to remember my row count, I'm gonna place a stitch marker in one of the stitches I've just done for row 2. So when I finish row 2, the loops on my needle is gonna be the loops of row 2. And when I work on the other panel, I'm going to do the same thing. After I work a number of stitches of row 2, I'm gonna mark one of the loops on my right needle so I know that row is row 2. But honestly, we're really counting the rows because we need to make a second panel, otherwise it doesn't really matter. It's the measurement of the rows that matters more, not the row count. So I have the ribbing here and 2 rows of the main panel. Depends on how long you want your top to be. You're going to work a number of rows until you reach the underarm. So I want my top to be really cropped. I'm going to put it like that and continue working my row up until it reaches about there. So it goes up and we stop there, and then from the next row we do the decrease. So it doesn't go straight up anymore, it goes diagonally like that. But if you want your top to be longer, then you would need to work more rows to reach that spot. So I'll continue working my rows up like that, and then I'll come back and tell you how many rows I've done. So this is how many rows I've done. I've got my stitch marker here. So each loop is 1 row. After the stitch marker, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 loops. If you're not sure whether you could remember the row count, you can always take a photo. Make sure the rows are stretched out. Okay, next we're going to do some decrease so that we can shape the armholes. So this is what I'm going to do the next row. I'm going to get rid of the first 5 stitches, decrease, and then decrease here before the last 5 stitches, and get rid of the last 5 stitches as well. So I'm going to separate the first 5 stitches from the rest of the stitches with a stitch marker like that. And then I do the same thing here. So I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches. And then to cast this stitch off, I'm going to grab it and then pull it over this one. So we just cast off 1 stitch. To cast off this one, knit the next stitch and then pull that one over this one. And then I'm going to continue doing that. I'm going to knit the next stitch, cast off the stitch before. This is the third stitch. Knit this one, cast off this one. This is the fourth stitch. And now we have one last stitch here that needs to be cast off, right? Because our stitch marker is here. We need to get rid of this stitch as well. So I knit the next stitch to get rid of this one. And cast it off like that. So now if you remember, we already knitted this stitch. That's why it's on the right needle. But for now, just let me put it back like that, so that I have the correct stitch number from here. So after casting off 5 stitches, I'm going to knit 1 stitch, which we already did. And then after the first stitch, I'm gonna make a decrease. So the decrease is going to be very easy. We're just going to knit the next 2 stitches together. So treat them as one loop and then knit them together like that. And then from the next stitch, I can just knit each stitch, no decrease, until you reach 3 stitches before this stitch marker. So 5 stitches here, stitch marker, and then 3 stitches. Okay, now I have 3 stitches before the stitch marker, and then 5 stitches here. I'm going to make a decrease here over the next 2 stitches by doing a knit 2 together again. So knit those 2 stitches together, and then knit 1 more. And then we need to cast off these ones. We start with knitting the first 2 stitches together. So 1, this is a stitch we need to cast off. 2, knit 1 more stitch, and then cast off this one. You just bring it over the stitch after it. So continue doing that. Knit 1, cast off the stitch before, okay. Now I have 1 stitch left. The next row we need to start from here. So the simplest way for me to do is just fasten off here. I'm going to take off this loop, then grab yarn, pull it through like that. I'm going to cut here, pull it through, and pull tight. Okay, then I'm going to turn my work and then start knitting from the beginning of this row. Okay, to join the yarn here, I'm going to make a slip knot. So just create a circle with this yarn under, and then pull it through, create a loop like that. Insert in the very first stitch as if to knit, and then put this loop like that with the short end on the left. So put it on the hook like that, and then pull it through. And just like the row before, after the first stitch, I'm going to decrease. So I'm going to knit these 2 loops together. And then I'm going to knit every single stitch until I have 3 stitches left. And when you have 3 stitches left, we're going to do a decrease first by knitting these 2 stitches together. Knit them. And then knit the last stitch. Turn your work again. We repeat the same thing. So we're just going to repeat that decrease row, which is knit the first stitch and then knit the next 2 stitches together as a decrease. Then from the next stitch, knit every single stitch as usual. And then near the end of the row, when you have 3 stitches left, you're gonna knit these 2 stitches together and then knit the last stitch as well. So that's the pattern for the decrease row. You're going to keep repeating this decrease row, and because every time we do that decrease row, the stitch number reduces, I don't really need to count my row count of the decrease rows. I just need to keep decreasing until I reach a certain number of stitches. So I'm gonna do my decrease rows, and then I'll show you where I'm gonna stop decreasing. So I continued working the decrease rows until the stitches get to the width of the shoulder of the top. And now I happen to have 20 stitches. So from the next row, I'm going to stop decreasing. I'm just going to continue knitting every single stitch to work my way up here. And if this is a front panel, before we go too far, we need to split the stitches to shape the neckline, but I'm gonna make the back panel first, so I'm just gonna continue working straight up like that until it reaches my shoulder, with the ribbing being at my underbust. So I have 20 stitches here. When I work the other panel, I'll just need to remember to keep decreasing until I have 20 stitches. I don't need to count how many decrease rows I've done. So I'm just gonna keep knitting back and forth, and before I start the next row, I can probably just mark one of these stitches, like one of these stitches here, so that when I finish the panel, I can know how many rows I've done from here. So from the next row, no decrease, I'm just gonna knit every single stitch. So that row is my last decrease row, and then from there I worked 20 rows. So now the whole thing measures about 10 inches, and these plain rows are about 6 inches. So now I'm going to cast these stitches off. So basically, I'm going to start by knitting the first 2 stitches and then cast off the very first stitch. Knit the next one, cast it off, and then you just continue doing that. Knit 1 stitch, cast this stitch before it off, and then do that all the way to the end of the row. And when you reach the end of the row, knit the very last stitch, cast the stitch before it off, and then just grab this loop, pull the yarn through, leave a little bit length, and then cut the yarn. And that's the back panel done. And then you're gonna make the front panel. For the front panel, everything else is the same, but we will need to make a little gap here for the neckline, but everything before that, you can make it in the same way. So for the front panel, I'm going to begin it in the exact same way as the back panel. So I'm gonna cast on the same number of stitches, work the same number of rows for the ribbing, and then same number of rows for this part, and then work the same number of rows for the decrease as well. So you can rewind the video and follow the same instructions to make another panel. So you're gonna work all the way up to here, which is right before you finish the decrease, which is when I have 20 stitches in a row for the first time, because around this part we're going to make a neckline for the front panel. So when I made the front panel, I did the same thing here. So I put a stitch marker in the same row, and then I made sure I made the same number of rows before I start shaping the armholes. So the front panel, I made 10 rows after the marked stitch. So after that row, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And next we're going to make stitches here and here, but cast off the center 10 stitches so we have a hole for the neck. So this is how we do it. I'm going to knit the first 5 stitches back and forth. So knit the first 5. And then I'm going to ignore all these, turn my work, and continue working these 5 stitches. So I have my stitches here, but I'm gonna pretend they're not there and continue working these ones. So that's 2 rows, and then I'm gonna turn again and work those 5 stitches again. Row 3, turn, and then row 4, and then I'm just gonna work row 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, just on these 5 stitches. I'll see you back here when I finish those rows. So that was 10 rows. So from that one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And my yarn tail should be on this end. Now I'm going to cast these stitches off, just like what we did for the back panel. So knit 2 stitches, and then cast off the one before, and then cast the rest of the stitches off as well. Fasten off. So we have one shoulder done. Now we need to work the rest of the stitches. I'm going to join my yarn here. So I'll insert in the first stitch, make a slip knot, knit 1, knit the second one, then cast off the first stitch. Okay, I'm gonna cast off 10 stitches and then knit the last 5 stitches. When I have 5 stitches left, I'm gonna knit one more to cast this one off, and then I knit the next 4 stitches, and this is gonna be the first row of this shoulder. And then you turn your work to work row 2, and then you just continue working back and forth, work 8 more rows after row 2. So work 10 rows like that, and then cast these stitches off, just like you did before. And now that's the front panel done. You might notice because we continued working here and then rejoined the yarn here, this is not connected. So what I'm gonna do is just tie it to the row above. Now it's time to join the front panel with the back panel together. So I have my yarn tail from the very beginning of this panel and the yarn tail of this panel as well. Make sure they're not on the same side. So I'm gonna flip it so that they're not on the same side. Now what I'm gonna do is join these edges together, these together, and then these stitches to here. So I have a yarn tail here. I'm just gonna use this one to sew up this edge. So I'll try to line these up, and all I'm gonna do is just simple whip stitch. So it goes like that and then goes like that again. Make sure I find the corners. So like that. And then the next row as well. For the shoulder, you can pretty much do the same thing, just whip stitch. And then you just fasten off here, make sure the stitch doesn't come undone. And then you do the same thing here and here, weave in all the ends, and then your top is done.